Trends podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Another day of life to take a breath. Well, at least an uncontaminated nuclear breath at the moment. We look at Taiwan. Coast Guard currently warning Chinese Navy alter their course. Out near the Matsu Islands, Chinese vessel 548 has come within 3 miles of the islands themselves. So there's 2 Taiwanese Coast Guard vessels directing them to leave. And if they do not, they will enter action to repel the Chinese vessel. Also, Taiwanese Xingfen 3 supersonic anti-ship missiles are being moved into defensive positions across the island. This is at the same time that Russia has gone into Estonia, apparently to remove the demarcation between the river. So now we got these 2 things going on at the same time, and obviously whoever knows something knows that militaries can't really be 2 places at once. Now can they? And also Chinese giving us a coded message here. I shall read it to you. This comes from Wang Wenbin. This is China's foreign ministry spokesperson, says Taiwan independence forces will be left with their heads broken and blood flowing after colliding against the great undertaking of China achieving complete unification. So we look at this as this all happened just within the last couple of hours here. And Ransom and I were going to continue to talk about the giant hailstones pounding, the record sea temperatures between South America and Africa, where most of the hurricanes get their power from, and this 2005 sea surface temperature map, as well as the sea surface temperature map that we're seeing right now, is far more intense than even the Katrina build-up hurricane. So there's a lot of things going on in terms of grain pricing. Also, a huge amount of new news saying that corn crop in America is far behind. They're 2 weeks past their prime planting dates. So every day that they're waiting now, because there's been so much rain, they're losing yields every day. So this is weeks past their prime planting dates. So as they put in the percentages, we're really low in terms of how much corn has been put into the ground due to such wet conditions. South America is going to be downgrading most of their crop forecast. And you just have to ask, and why? Well, somebody wasn't really telling the entire truth about the drought before the record floods in Brazil. Now, were they? We got record cold across South America, especially Argentina. They had to go rolling blackouts because the draw on the grid was so heavy so early that they weren't prepared for it. And they're trying to stabilize their power loads. And we're getting snow in places that doesn't normally snow in South America. So are we at global boiling, or I think we're at a known cycle juncture? Just saying. It's been predicted to this point, and that's the point of the show tonight, is the things that were predicted up to this point. We've reached them pretty much unanimously. Almost everything we've spoken about over the last several years has come to fruition. There's only a couple things that hasn't, and now the amplification phase begins. So I want to read one last headline here, and Ransom, take it away. The first 10 days of May, European Russia, coldest in history, unprecedented May snow hitting Moscow as well. So we have it in Argentina, in Chile, record snows, and then also we have record snows in May, first 10 days. So it looks like the planet is starting to show us that you might emit stuff out of a tailpipe, but it has no effect, as Mother Nature is far more powerful. Chile, Santiago, Chile, longest cold spell ever recorded. These things are starting to match up right now, that perhaps the reason we're seeing the world being restructured is because those that know the cycles better, that have access to museums and Vatican libraries and private collections, would know this cycle is inbound. And here we sit at this juncture. You can't save it. So what do you do instead? You extract the wealth and take it to a different part of the planet, which I think we're seeing. So anyway, Ransom, glad you're joining me tonight. And the rain has been off and on. If you hear I may have to mute the mic for a minute. Another rain's coming in. I just started a trickle on the roof there. We had some massive, incredible rains where it got so loud in the house, I couldn't even hear my speakers barely. So round 2 is coming, and hopefully this is the last one for the evening. But anyway, welcome. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, it does look like, as predicted, just recently, just last week, we were talking about heads of state, the Duke Ferdinand effect, I guess. And, several went off in a row. You got the guy that got shot 5 times, and then you got the Irish anti-globalist MEP that almost, met his assassin, and then and then bad weather for the Iranian guy. Or is it the video that's floating around with the missile tagging? I don't know. But either way,
I haven't seen that. Didn't see that one.
Yeah, I don't know if it's verified or not, but it's going around Twitter now. It shows the same type of helicopter getting hit by some kind of ground-to-air missile. So who knows what the story is on that. Either way, we know that there's turmoil going to be following. A lot of people don't realize Iran is a very shattered population from north to south, different sects of the same religion. There's different internal strifes going on there, so no telling how that's going to turn out internally. But on the outside, you can see the regional war expanding right out, and it won't be long until the regional war to the north of them on the other side of Turkey meets the regional war to the south of Turkey, and those kind of turn into one thing. But yeah, this the Chinese thing, I don't know if they will. I think it's a bluff this time. I totally think it's a bluff. However, maybe they were hoping that Taiwan itself might do something that they could use for a justification. But I really think that this is just, a show of force, because they're doing all kinds of stuff. I don't know if you saw the article, and this is another thing that we predicted, that this year would be the year of the robotic wars with robots on the field. I was saying that they were already there between China and the United States, but now we're getting to actually see them. And so they have lethally leashed. China unveils robot dogs of war with machine guns mounted on their backs, which is another thing I predicted as soon as those dogs came out, that someone would, put some weapons on it. And, within the month when I predicted that, some rich kid bought one of those Boston Dynamics robots, and he put a Nerf gun on it, demonstrating exactly what they were intended to use for. Of course, the company said, "Oh, how dare you? We would never use our products in that way. That's just abhorrent." But of course they are. They sell products. Everybody's got them now. So China had a test run with its newest military edition robot dogs equipped with machine guns on their back. They even put leashes on it, I guess, for that added, dystopian look. The machine gun robo dogs are going through drills for 15-day exercise called Golden Dragon with Chinese and Cambodian troops. Isn't that nice? Those two countries together. It's not like either one of them have a history of doing bad things to large amounts of people, so I totally wouldn't worry about this at all. And if, according to this other guy here, in this Business Insider article, the world's chip makers can just flip a switch to a kill switch should China invade Taiwan. According to this, they're saying that the chip makers can just, flip a kill switch, which might want to interest you further on what they can do to you. Now, as far as other predictions, I think it was only 2 weeks ago that I kind of was harping on the idea that we have machines, technologies, learning machines, AI, connected to sensors that can read your mind, literally and figuratively, if you count the image generation that can also come from the mind. And then they announced within the same week, guess what? We can do it remotely. You don't have to have wires attached to you. We could do that. And I was putting out the idea that if they can take, information out of your head, uh, ideas, images, feelings, all of that, they could put them back in. And according to this Sun article, which is kind of tabloid, but they've been pretty right too, actually, Chat XPT or GPT, China builds Xi Jinping AI chatbot to control thoughts, politics, and actions. And of course, it's going to be blocking U.S. citizens from being able to insert data or check out what's going on because they don't want other people. And I see this for the future of the entire world. Each country is going to slowly shut off the flow of information. And matter of fact, we'll skip out of the AI arena for a minute and just look at the situation of the internet. Here's one. The internet is disappearing, study says. This is another thing we predicted. I know last year we were talking about how everything was shrinking. The sites were disappearing. It's harder and harder to get information, or at least multiple viewpoints of information, or a different angle on it, or anything. All of that is being erased away. You will have the same the same opinion as the matrix tells you to have. You're going to have it. You have to have it. And if you don't, you're going to be an outlier who sticks out. So the internet is disappearing. Study says almost 40% of web pages from 2013 no longer exist a decade on. And they go into here and find out that, more and more of it's being sucked up by bigger countries. It's being deleted. It's moving to a different site. But most of it is just getting replaced or blocked, so you can't even see it. The internet is disappearing, according to the study. The web is often a place where you think that information is going to last forever, but according to their study, vast swaths of it are being lost as pages are deleted, according to this new research. But this isn't the only epiphany that's happening. Google's AI first ambition, sideline publishers, boost its ability to filter and control information. So Google's just, right out there with it. They are going to try to tell you on this end. And remember, Google and China have been in bed together for quite some time. So the ideas that are coming out over here are the same ideas that they're enacting over there. So if you're tired of censorship, there's very little places that you can go now. That's what's happening. They're all conglomerating power. So you can say goodbye to cloud anonymity as well as new U.S. regulations demand user identification. Now, you sent me I think it was a text or something talking about them passing a bill not to or to forbid the CBDC. The problem with that, I think, is that whether there's a central digital dollar or not, the companies that run everything will have multiple digital currencies that are basically the same currencies, and they are the gatekeepers on whether or not you're going to be ordering things. And that includes food. That is the direction of food. I think most people are starting to get it, that the stores are just nothing more than internet outlets, including Walmart and other places. They've been overcharging for their products for some time. And people are tired of dealing with it and the possibility of, because of running into other people, basically, because we're becoming more and more secluded at the same time as having our viewpoints of the world manipulated by the internet. Because most people have their nose in their phone at this point, or they're at home on a desktop, or they're at work at a desktop. And all of these devices are intertwined, forming opinions and telling you what's not going to be allowed. And I think it doesn't matter if they have a CBDC specifically. They're going to have all of these systems that are essentially the same thing, where they are the gatekeepers of what you buy, what you read, And they are the ones that will decide that you are a bad or a good citizen based on things that you post online, things that you shop for, people or places that you like on the social media. So they got a good profile of you. If you ever heard of when a murder happens, they bring in a profiler to figure out the MO of a murderer or a criminal of some kind. Well, the entire system has been doing that to us individually. They know what you're going to get just about before you get it. They know when you're broke. They know when you're doing good. They know when you're in need of products. It's really bizarre. And I know a lot of people joke around about talking, and then the internet or their Google or YouTube or whatever it is starts showing them commercials of exactly what they were talking about needing. Well, it's going to get worse than that. They are listening in. They are passing laws for the government so they can just eavesdrop at will, to sideline the Constitution or whatever laws they have in their country. They're just going to use these giant conglomerate companies, the tech companies, to do what they're not allowed to do. And that's the same thing that's been happening for some time, ever since Edward Snowden. We found out, like places like Verizon had an entire floor dedicated to the letter agency spying on people. And it's just going to get worse from there. And, we have to combine these topics because people don't get it, I think. So we're talking about robotic warfare. We're talking about the first stages of governments using robotic in policing and warfare, which means eventually those are the kind of squads that will be knocking on your door about your Facebook post, or whether or not you're hoarding food or hiding food, or whether or not you traveled outside of your zone without permission. Yeah, I know that sounds all far-fetched, but everything else is lining up along with these predictions. And they are trying to really emphasize the bad weather this year, from tornadoes to hurricanes. They're even saying it's going to be the hottest year on record for Mexico. And, I'm still wondering, how do they know that if they've only been keeping records? What is it, 50 years max? If you can, give them 50 years of taking decent records, and even those they skew and misinterpret or leave out data, lie by omission. So who knows which direction we're going to go? But we're supposed to be super hot here right now, and each night has been nice and cool. I was just looking at the weather forecast there. You guys are getting pounded by thunderstorms, and it looks like if you live in Oklahoma around Altus, I'm no meteorologist, but this is the telltale hook here if you're looking on the Ventusky there. So if you're any line in this line, I would probably take cover and get out. I'm sure the locals are warning you by now, but every time I see those little fingers stick out on the Doppler radars, some bad stuff happens afterwards. Like I said, I'm no meteorologist, but this stuff happens every year. And like I said last time, it's just bizarre to me that all of our infrastructure and stuff keeps pushing people into these unstable zones without the proper housing to live there. So if you live in Florida, you should not be living on the beach. You should be living off the beach, further inland. Your house should be elevated, and it should be hurricane proof, or at least near hurricane proof. I know there's no such thing. And if you live in these tornado areas, I really think that you should go back old school and dig up a storm cellar and start shoving food down in there. And if you're rich, buy you a domed house, one of those things I used to read about in Omni magazine when I was like 8 years old, that they could build, domed houses along Tornado Alley that would just allow the wind to go over the contour of the houses, basically not damaging anything or anyone. But we don't do that. We're all about destruction and rebuilding. Our entire system is built on that. And now we're coming to a head at the Great Destruction, the Great Reset, which unfortunately is what they want to do before we get to the great rebuilding. Biden jokes about building back better. I'm not sure what he's building back better. It seems like he's building back the 70s economy to me. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a mathematician or nothing.
Well, let me get on some mathematicianing for you then. 1,000,000 seconds ago was May 8th. Today it's the 23rd, so 1,000,000 seconds ago. 1 billion seconds ago was 1993. A trillion seconds ago was 30,000 BC. U.S. national debt is now rising by 1 trillion every 100 days. So we'll be back 100,000 years after this year with the same, if we're ticking seconds, as we would be with the debt increasing. I'll put that in perspective. There's absolutely no way anything is going to get paid back. And to your point, I had read more than a handful of articles already about individual banks like JP Morgan putting out their own stable coins. Not really a central bank digital currency as such, but a way that you can store your value on a ledger. That ledger is issued by them, and that ledger would also be interswappable. And if you've seen the new Visa articles coming out, where you can link any and all of your bank accounts into your one Visa account. So you don't have to have multiple cards for different accounts. Like, let's say you have a business account and you have a personal account at at the same bank, you're going to get 2 sets of cards. And if you have a second bank and you have the same thing, then you're going to have, 4 to 6 cards, anything from debit cards to the credit cards. And Visa's coming out and saying, well, you can put that all under one roof now, where you only need one card connected to all of your banks. This is the exact same thing that's talked about with these ledgers that are going to be given or created, which they already have been, by large banks in the United States, all digital, of course, but then interswappable amongst other banks. So if you have a JP Morgan token, that will be swappable for, I don't know, Bank of America token, and that will be equal for 1-to-1 at Wells Fargo, and that'll be equal to 1-to-1 at Truist, and that'll be equal to 1-to-1 wherever you go. The U.S. government will not issue that. So back to that point, when in the beginning there of, they say that it makes it looks good on paper, like no central bank digital currency. But then it's the individual companies. Like, the American government did not mandate that you have to wear masks during COVID. It was the stores. It was store policy, man. And your constitutional rights are just nothing. This Costco trumps all of your state and federal rights. All of your liberties are given up at the door because you have that little white card that show at the James Bond Center to let you even in and buy stuff. No mask, no entry. Hey. And I love how you, at the end, when you leave somewhere, you're guilty until proven innocent at Costco. You got to show your receipt like you're a common thief before they'll let you out of the store. That's one thing. Guilty until proven innocent. You might as well go communist regime style in Costco. So they're going to leave it up to the companies and the banks to issue their own, like I say, tokens, 1-to-1 and equal to a dollar value, and they will each individual issue your own. There's been a huge, go to the Bank for International Settlements. I mean, everybody talks about, it's a conspiracy there. You never find it. Yeah. Bank for International Settlements put everything out. You just need to take the time to read through the droves of PDFs they put out monthly. But inside there, they're very clean. It's on the table. You just don't take the time to read it, or most people don't. It's out there. And everybody thinks it's some kind of giant secret discussed with dudes smoking cigars around tables in hidden rooms somewhere. It's not. It's all out there for you to find. How do you think Ransom and I talk about this all the time and get the general trend correct most of the time? It's because they've already told you what the end plan and result will be. And you just have to follow the breadcrumbs of their action plan and accomplishments of, or milestones reached in that plan. If they're going to have 12 steps to get you there, they've already outlined the 12 steps, and all you would do is look through the news feeds to see which step has been accomplished, and you'd know that, okay, they reached milestone number 2, like they said they would by January of 2024. All right, well, then the next milestones are going to be hit in June of 2024, and then January of 2025. And they march you down the road, what they call it, a roadmap for a reason. And if you follow these roadmaps, you absolutely see where they're taking everything. And unfortunately for us, the roadmaps all lead to 2025 and everything's live. I really haven't seen anything pushed out further than June of 2025 before all these programs are live. So really, it's like a year plus a little bit. And I do want to bring you back to the semiconductor chips. Yeah, there's backdoors in there. understood that everything has a backdoor chip for all. And, that new creepy recall thing that's coming out with Microsoft, they've admitted that when you're using your Word documents, if there's hate speech or some kind of things that are considered offensive, they can remove your license and delete all of your files off of your computer and render all of them just blank again, based on what you're writing in those documents and those text documents. Also on Skype, if you tick a bunch of the boxes after, I think, the third offense, they can remove your Skype account just for what you're saying or what you're writing. So this recall thing where they're going to photograph your computer every 1 second to give you a build back of what you looked at, who cares? But obviously they say it's encrypted and going to be stored on a local device, but that's BS. There's going to be backdoors into that as well. It's already planned. Every 3-letter agency has backdoors into everything. There's backdoors into the PCs. There's backdoors into the phones. There's backdoors into the satellite communications. There's backdoors into everything. So if you think that the recall is just going to be a total thing here, now let's back to the semiconductor chips. Now, this is an incredible statement coming today, and all of things that you mentioned here, because I follow Willem Middelkoop. He's like one of the #1 junior miner investors for not only, well, it's more on the precious metal side of things and also copper and industrial metals. But he's probably one of the best in the world, but I follow his feed. And he has one out right now here. It says, this is absolutely incredible. If you're under the illusion that China has very little progress in semiconductors, listen to what Philip Wong says. Now, and I didn't know Philip Wong, so I had to look him up on net. He's a chief scientist at TSMC, which is the main #1 semiconductor producer in Taiwan, and a legendary professor of electrical engineering at Stanford University, undoubtedly one of, if not the world's leading scientific figure in the field of semiconductors, period. And even everybody else who's in that field is like, yep, this is the #1 guy. Just like everywhere else. If you look at Vitalik Buterin, an enormous amount of people in the field will go, yep, Vitalik, same thing with this guy right here. So what does he say? He said years ago we had the technical conferences and we saw that all these papers from China, yeah, they were not, the quality wasn't there, not even competitive. That was the 80s and 90s. Now they're better than us, China. So he's like, if you look at all these papers and publications, data from key conferences in the chip business over the last 3 years, you'll notice that 50% of the papers were from the US 20 years ago. Now it's just 30%. He's absolutely convinced and very sure that the ability that China has been keeping under wraps for their chip production to, let's say, hoodwink the rest of the planet as to their production quality had fallen off a cliff. They're not going to be able to compete. And if they invade Taiwan, they're just going to press a button and shut everything off on the chips. That is a pipe dream. Suddenly now, with all this reunification talk, China suddenly has some of the best chip technology in the world, and they're finally coming clean and public with it. That's what this guy, Philip Wong, is talking about, chief scientist at TSMC. And he rolls up and says, yeah, what the Chinese always say, going from 0 to 1, starting from nowhere, nothing, and coming up with a brand new idea. He says, we can't even compete anymore. They have better resources, more students, more funding from the government. And then he's talking about himself trying to get resource grants. I cannot compete in that field any longer. The Chinese have poured so much money into it. So this progress from Chinese semiconductor manufacturers coming out as of with this interview seems that they have usurped everybody in their quiet sneakiness and have been developing behind the scenes all the while, letting everybody believe if they invaded Taiwan, they would just press a button and all the semiconductors would be useless. But it turns out that that's not really the case now, is it? Now, at the same time, which is interesting here, and again, when I started the show, I was talking about China launching military exercises around Taiwan. The last time they did this, they encircled at least half, probably 3/4 of the island. Well, this time it is completely surrounded. And when I say that, they're using like 50 naval vessels on the main island of Taiwan, and then 140 other vessels up and down the coast from the Jinmen Islands up to the Matsu, Wuqiu, Dongying. They've all come within a few miles of these islands, which is, well, considered invasion space, literally within a couple of miles of the islands. Usually they would stay off and not really be so provocative. But with Russia going across into Estonia and changing the river boundary markers, and this occurs in the same days, and you have to realize in Taiwan they just had elections. So Tsai Ing-wen is on her way out, and as this new government is forming itself, passing laws at midnight when nobody can read them, it's becoming quite strange in Taiwan too. Is like there's politician infighting because they're trying to pass a bevy of laws without reading them first, and then suddenly they pop up on the books where if one of the governmental, just say Green Party and Blue Party, so it doesn't really matter which is which. But if one, like let's say the Green Party was saying, hey, Blue Party, your politician needs to come in front of us and answer questions because of something they don't like politically. If they don't come, they're allowed to arrest them, even the president of the nation. This was passed under the sneakiness of midnight with nobody there, and suddenly it's on the books. Yeah, we can arrest anybody we want if they don't say what we want or if they don't come and see us. We can just arrest any politician, including the head of the country. So this is all just within the last couple of days with the change of government. So all these like stealthy imprisonment laws have been passed. And, you know, just knowing what we do here in the sneakiness of midnight too, and all these acts that are passed that nobody even reads the legislation before it gets put on the books, the exact same thing is happening there. So the changing over of the government, and China is like I said, I read you, they're going to bloody the heads of anybody trying to resist over there. And I find it incredibly interesting that at the same time, Russia stepped into Estonia to reestablish and remark the river boundaries. So can a military take on two mighty superpowers at the same time? That is more the question. So, and moving these supersonic anti-ship missiles into defensive positions, obviously somebody knows something. That's what I would say. Now, the ongoing Taiwanese Coast Guard, Chinese Navy altercation, this could very well be the thing that kicks it off. If somebody gets fired upon or there's a collision out there, it's absolutely going to intensify from here. But here we go. Defense Politics Asia. This is a site I do follow that's over on Telegram. Just came through with a few more updates here. They're talking about some Ukrainian capture. Oh, yeah. China pushing Taiwan with joint exercise SWORD 2024A. So they're completely around the islands. Now, Ransom, I didn't send you that, but let me see if I can drop you the links over there. This is meant to be provocative and to try to spur some sort of aggression so then the next person can retaliate, whichever side that would be. So anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought trying to look at these maps here. But it does seem that armies are now moving into positions. And I know, Ransom, you and I talked about this. This is another thing I want to say. You need to go back about 8 months or so. And we said for sure that as soon as both sides would be bogged down, that when Russia took the next step to get in either full invasion into Ukraine or periphery nation to bog down NATO and America, that the Chinese were going to move on Taiwan. Well, you can listen to several of our broadcasts. Me and Ransom talked about this, just to have a double-fronted war. And suddenly the Dwight Eisenhower disappeared over in the South China Sea. We got a full carrier group that just popped up right in the middle of all of this agitation, and a carrier group rocks up there as of this afternoon. So what were we stumbling across, or our train of thought was, you can't fight two major wars split like that in such a degraded economy, because with all this money printing, we will become like the Romans. They could not afford their army. We will become like the British. They could never afford their empire after the collapse of the currency. We will not be able to afford to keep our military out and running and occupying all these nations. It's an impossibility. You might as well adjust from this point. As you know, the adjustment is coming. It's not a maybe, will sometime in the future. It is at the doorstep. And we will have to think, and how would you rise? Where's the hope? How do we adjust and thrive and find our power in this time? Because for each individual person, it's going to be a little bit different. Nations are going to be going against nations. They're going to try to have you hate people, which, could very well be your allies in terms of fighting off this globalist elite and these demonic forces across our planet. But what did the demonic forces have us do? Fight good light-bearing souls on the planet, fighting light-bearing souls on the planet. That's how they're going to distract you, is by having beings of light fight each other versus coming together and seeing for the monster for what it is and trying to take it out. I don't know, man. Maybe I rambled a little too long there, but I'll pass it right back to you.
No, we exactly talked about how this was probably going to roll out with a similar look to the theater of war as World War II. And think about it. We have the Middle East bloc that will be one regional war. And then you have the Eurasian bloc, a second one. And, you mix that with the Duke Ferdinand thing, and I keep bringing this up. We are seeing heads of state being assassinated, and this links right into here. You're right. Russia makes a move. China makes a move. And what this sets up is a duplicate of World War II, except for the powers being slightly different. You still have a buildup in the Pacific bloc, the theater of war. And remember, we talked about how this would happen right before the food shortages. And the reason for that is because this is going to tangle up all shipping. And think about it, with the president of Iran gone, those canals over there, those entrances and exits for products are going to get closed down. And the same things are going to happen here in the Pacific region, where there's going to be some really, strange things going on, some little events that happen, and it'll probably surround shipping of goods. And then back home, when you come back to the United States, what are they preparing you for here? I mean, if I could push the right button. America's dairy cow replacement inventory collapses. It's to a 2-decade low. And we were talking about this, how the beef would disappear. You count in all the beef that died from the fire, all the beef supposedly that died from the vid. You remember they were trying to tell us that too. The cows that died from the heat wave. It's on and on. These indications that there's going to be a food problem catching up. And we said that, watch, it'll domino into this. And now they're exactly saying that. The nation's food supply chain remains under stress. We have been sounding the alarm on America's beef cattle supply, dwindling to its lowest levels in over half a century. And just read the headline. They go together. America's dairy cow, specifically, replacement inventory collapses to 2-decade low. Very next article here. Bird flu is more widespread among dairy cows, sewage tests suggest. So not only are they telling you there's barely any dairy cows, which, if you remember, what are the things that skyrocket when we go to war or there's some kind of economic problem with the food? Milk, butter. Milk and butter, they skyrocket. So here it is, dairy cows. Next, you'll be hearing about the beef cattle shortage, and then on and on. And here's a good one, and this is kind of out there, but this links into what you were saying. We have all of these financial bubbles going on. We have all of these indications that they are definitely trying to transition over to a digital system and remove private paper money out of the equation. They're done with that. They've stolen just about all they can steal from inflation and deflation and printing money and controlling where it goes. But the question is why is it not only us that is totally in debt? Who are all the countries in debt to? Well, we know the answer to that. It's the private Federal Reserve banking cartel that exists in all of these block theaters of war that will soon be active. The same banks, just like World War II, the same bankers, the same banks, the same financiers, the same sources of precious metal. Today, we talk more about rare earth elements than we do of the precious metals, but it's the same idea. And here's the title to this article on Shift Gold, not just the U.S., global debt to GDP ratios are skyrocketing. So the question is, doesn't it seem like the entire world is in need of paying rent to someone? Who is it that the whole world owes to, right? And if the banks are just collecting that debt for us, who are they paying? And it kind of goes back into the gold and the silver collection and now the rare earth elements. And yeah, they are trying to tell you, don't worry about it. We got backdoors in those chips, which bring me to the next point. I'm sure you've seen, in recent year, we've seen some pretty far out there stuff like birthing facilities where you just grow the baby in there. We know that's a sound technology. So really all they need is permission to do that. But then on the other hand, here's this one. Let me reload that for viewers. Wild footage shows AI robots transplanting heads onto brain dead bodies with life-saving brain bridge tech, right? And undoubtedly, they're going to have some kind of nanotech or hardware to implement and offset the trauma of those surgeries. But don't worry about it, because Musk's brain chip is to be implanted into the second patient. And I'm still putting to you that this is some kind of archaic technology that they're just using as kind of a more non-threatening version of what they really intend on doing, which is merging biology and technology completely. We're at that singularity. It's about to happen. According to this article, Neuralink is planning to extend its trial to 10 people this year, allowing them to interact with the computer using their thoughts. Now, keep in mind, we were just talking about how China is going to implement AI to try to control thought. We've talked about how technology is at the point where it can not only manipulate, but control information that's inputted and outputted from the human brain. And then on top of that, in the background, what were we talking about? Backdoor access to chips. So no matter what chip, just like you were saying, it doesn't matter what chip it is from what company, you can bet that there's either backdoors from not only the company itself by random lone wolf hackers, but also DARPA. DARPA is the one that feeds these institutions and tech companies with the original ideas of this stuff, and they're the ones that are pushing it. So you would think that they also would have a backdoor into it. So we're talking about a mix-matched web of random AIs and technologies that are, kind of octopusing their tentacles together around the world. And in all of that, you have multiple ways to destroy that system. So that system seems very vulnerable. And, we're at the spot where we can actually manipulate the outcome of this, just like time travelers, just like if you have a baby and you allow that baby to live, it's going to grow up into a human being. Well, the same thing is true for these programs, robotics, and initiatives used to spy on stuff. So this world's top chip maker can flip a kill switch, may be true in a way, and like you were saying, it may not also be totally true. But I found some other interesting ideas here that kind of relate to that. Here's one from Barron's Wall Street Journal associated platform, and they're saying AI completely relies on mass surveillance. So that means if you're not connected to the system, and they can't spy on you. But that's okay because they've planned for that. And that's why you can't walk outside today anywhere in the Western world just about without complete control grid surveillance. I cannot walk outside of my house, and I live, relatively far outside of the small city that I live in. But even out here, they have gunshot detectors, cameras on every corner, not to mention the back doors to all of the devices in everyone's possession. They are everywhere. I'm sure that everybody that is looking at a phone right now has 3 or 4 obsolete phones, probably in a drawer or a closet somewhere, a couple of tablets that don't work, and several devices that, guess what, can be powered remotely, whether they're charged up or not. That's right. They have that technology. The question is how soon will it merge? Has it already happened? Are they just warming us up to the idea, or are they still building the infrastructure? And I would say that both are almost true. They're still building the infrastructure, but at the same time, it's not complete. So where does this go from here? I think what they're going to be doing is trying to convince you that you don't need to eat and that it's your fault that there's not much food because of the bad weather, and the bad weather is because of you, and you overpopulate, and it's just going to be a constant beat over your head session from here on out about how humans are bad. And therefore, if you're sitting there at home watching on the news how this combat's going on over here and this one's going over here and these people are starving and those people are dealing with record heat and storms and other people are in a famine, you're going to go, oh, well, that's our fault because of the level of society we're in. Man totally destroyed themselves. It's our fault. And that's the idea that they're going to bring you. And then you will be slowly convinced that the AI, the robotics, and the control mechanism is actually your savior, right? It's your savior. They're going to distribute the food. Don't worry about that. There's not that much of it. We will make sure everybody gets their fair share and ration. How about that? Doesn't that sound nice?
Sounds peachy, as they would say. But you were talking about metals. So I've been dabbling into those who are talking about silver forecast pricing, and what seems to be a unanimous thought across those who trade and buy silver is that the amount of paper silver contracts versus the silver physical contracts is going to break, and that in turn will break what they call the spot market. The spot market is only there for the paper contracts to be manipulated, so it's not finding its true discoverable price. But according to almost everybody, there's between 350 and 390 ounces of silver on paper contracts compared to one physical ounce out in the real world. Now, a lot of people store and warehouse their metals, but do you know you have your metals in a warehouse, yes or no? And that's the whole thing when people start to call and they're like, I need my 3,000 ounces of silver back because I'm warehousing it in your facility. And they're like, well, I'm sorry. Just hold on a minute. So we don't have it. And then once that word leaks out, then everybody who has anything in a storage facility is all going to call in unison pretty much in the same day saying, give me the silver back. So here's what I didn't understand I'm still trying to do the research on this, so bear with me while I try to explain it. Almost everybody is expecting absurd amounts for 1 ounce of silver. Like Alistair McLeod, he's predicting $2,000 per ounce. And I thought, Alistair, that's just smorgasbord talk. What are you talking about? David Morgan, who I've interviewed personally, I know him, I consider him a friend. I even have his phone number. And we chat occasionally, and he's saying that it would hit $1,500 per ounce. And then Rafi Faber, $1,000 an ounce, smash right through it. And then John Rubino's talking about $3,000 silver. Now, these are some pretty smart guys that are, in the top of their economic class. So if you're looking at, economic voices out there, these are some good ones to listen to. And, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki, and everybody else in between is talking multiple hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for an ounce of silver. And that is a unanimous, that it is nowhere remotely close to where it's going to go. OMG, it is going so far to the stratosphere that 100 ounces of silver and you'll be able to buy a house or a farm or pay off all your debts with a handful of silver. And this will be the new wealth class. You'll be considered a duke or an earl of sorts if you try to, come down central banks. Obviously, would be the kings and queens. If you're looking at the amount of money that royalty would have during the serfdom period, if you had 500 ounces of silver or 1,000 ounces of silver, you were definitely in the royal class. You were at that duke or, like I say, earl position, and you were a vast landholder. At the same time, if any of these prices really do reach $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 per ounce for silver, the rest of the economy would have crashed so greatly that 1 ounce of silver would literally be enough to buy a car. 10 ounces of silver would get you a house. Now, I want to come back to the story. I know I've told this maybe a couple times before. So the hyperinflation, it's happened in Austria, it's happened in Germany, it's happened in Hungary, it's in Zimbabwe. But if we go post World War I and we come down into Austria and we get to the German hyperinflation events, the amount to buy one pair of shoelaces after the economic devastation, the amount of money it would cost you to buy one pair of shoelaces before hyperinflation, you could have bought 40 pairs of brand new leather handmade shoes. The cost to fix a window in a house after the debasement and financial crisis, the price to fix a window and install a new window in your house cost you more than the entire value of the purchase price of the home. At the height of that, going in with 10 gold coins would buy you a full city block of apartment buildings for 10 gold 1 ounce coins. This is the insanity of holding metals and how much you could trade that or exchange that for at the height of a financial bubble / crisis. If it's remotely close to anything that happened in prior chapters of hyper-financialization, then you literally could pay off your house with a few ounces of silver. This is the type of world we might be entering. And at that point, where do you think your food's coming from? Because everything's based on credit. You know, these large corporations, at least in America, now I'm not going to speak so much to Europe, but I am going to speak about the American agribusiness. Everything's out on credit. They buy the seed using loans. Their machinery is purchased through banks on loans. Processing facilities, dryers, storage warehouses, facilities, grain silos, that's all built using credit. The fuel they buy to power the tractors, that diesel fuel that they're buying by, 30,000 gallons at a time, is on letters of credit through the banking system. If that were to falter in some way, shape, or form, you would not be able to finance the agricultural system as we know it today in America and Canada both. Now, Europe, that's a different animal. Their farms are a little bit smaller than ours. There's still a lot of family land holdings there that are, 5 acres, 10 acres, up to 50 acres. But here in America, everything's 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 acre farms. That's all purely credit and banking system. If that falters, then our food supply is almost instantly going to be cut. That's another thing nobody ever talks about, is how much credit is involved in the agricultural business. The agribusiness revolves around bank financing. Without it, there would be no food. If they were going to pay cash for everything they needed and their insurance premiums for everything they had to insure, there's no way any farmer could ever operate except at the gentleman's farm, 20 acre, 50 acre level. That would be maximum. And that would mean you have to have a decent paying job enough where you could just pay everything for cash. That just doesn't happen. So if you think that, $2,000 silver, where's our food coming from? But again, that was the whole thing about some of these hyperinflative events in Europe. 2 countries over, they're just sitting pretty and nothing collapsed and they were fine. Hotels were completely booked out. You got to realize every single hotel, we're going to talk about Austria here, every single hotel room was booked out every single night of every single week because people were flocking in from all the other countries that weren't devastated from inflation and coming in and just buying precious art, jewels, antiques of that time, even in the 1920s. One of the best jobs to ever have during that time was working in a restaurant. People would actually give you tips in metals. They would give you silver dollar tips. This is the thing. There was the most highly prized job was working in a restaurant in a hotel where all these foreigners were flocking in to buy everything at a discount because the service charges and what was paid in precious metals, i.e. silver, to the staff. And those people became wealthy enough to buy an enormous amount of land, property, and assets themselves by working in these restaurants and slash hotels during that time. But food was coming in from different places. You have to realize after World War I, I mean, how many countries were really involved in that war? I mean, Italy was just fine. Southern France was fine. You go down to Spain, they didn't have trenches running through Spain and Portugal. You know, I mean, there was a lot of places that were not damaged by that war. And this is going to be the very same thing when there's hyperinflation in places like because they're unaffected
In
by
Europe, this is commonly
Would they not
known
charter
as
an
the
airplane in
Justinian
with 100 other
period,
people who
named
all
after
had
the
gold coins and wanna
Justinian
come in and buy up
plague,
America?
and is believed to
Of
be
course
the
they
first
would.
appearance of the Black Death in Europe. Meanwhile, in the Mayan
Be right back
Empire,
after the
things
break.
were
Dave
looking
DuByne,
bad.
Ransom Godwin here,
Researchers
taking
have
you through the second
realized
hour.
that there is a
Confused about
100-year
dividend tax.
gap in the civilization's productivity starting in 540, suggesting a dark age. The civilization experienced mass crop failure, which led to disease, starvation, and likely internal strife. People evacuated cities in and around present-day El Salvador. Cities that were left behind experienced a dark age, as evidenced by a gap in written records and a sudden decrease in construction in Maya city centers during the 6th century. In China, 536 was no better. Frost and snow in July and August that killed the seedling crop, causing a major famine the following autumn. Weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. Procopius. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. The sun was dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Michael the Syrian. If such an event happened today, and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years, then once again a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. Thankfully, unlike the peoples of the worst year to be alive, we don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
is a poem to preface. There will be no collapse. The way some of these people think it will be. It's not going to be like the movie Dawn of the Dead or whatever, Red Dawn, where one day suddenly SHTF and prices skyrocket and everybody begins to riot in the streets. It's going to be far more insidious than that. Let's read the poem The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot and see if you understand this and if this kind of reflects modern day. So we're in the late night hour. I'm just going to smoothly and cleanly, without emotion, read this and just reflect on it for a moment, that this was written a very long time ago. And how did this person quantify, personify our modern world so cleanly? It's spooky, actually. But again, T.S. Eliot. You'll just notice that every day, simple things will become a little more expensive. Everyone's home and apartments will get a little bit smaller. Your work hours, they're going to get longer, but your pay will decrease. You'll see family and friends less and find that in that time you care less about them. Every day you'll find yourself lowering your standards for everything, for work, for food, relationships, job security, and that will no longer exist as a concept either. You notice houses and apartments shrinking. People start hanging onto their clothes longer and longer. Less people will get married, and even less will have children. People will engross themselves in technological distractions and fantasy while never truly experiencing the real world. The only thing left for them will be the reality of their debt and their poverty. And every minute of every day they will be told, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're weak, but together we're free, we're prosperous, we're safe. This is the collapse. The reduction of America, the American man, the American woman into a feudal serf, incapable of feeling love or hate, incapable of seeing the pitiful nature of the situation for what it is, or recognizing their own self-worth. Ransom, that's how I'm going to start this hour here, so floor is yours. But I think it does sum it up, and going back more than 100 years writing, how did all these people have crystal balls?
Well, a lot of the artists, not artists, I guess, I went brain dead right there thinking about it. Wow. The
Yeah,
people
throws it
that
for a
were,
loop, huh? That was written more than 100 years ago. That's scary.
right. Yeah, I couldn't think up I'm having one of those moments. I can't think up the name of the people that write books. See, the information
Authors,
really
man. That
is
just
really
scrambled your brain, bro. Authors.
yeah, well, that's where I was going, but yeah, I had a total brain fart and couldn't come up with that word. All of the old authors of most of these books, like in 1984, just about all of them, Soylent Green, they were in the circles of these elite eugenicist type groups that had these ideas. So it's not like they didn't know where things were going. Indeed, they warned us where they were going in great detail, and it has to boggle your mind how they exactly knew. Like 1984, for an example, they described television, radio, media, all of it just perfect the way it is right now. And so much so that tonight I was trying to make graphics using George Orwell, and I had to write paragraphs of description to get around the guy's name, because that is now considered, bad content. So that might offend everybody. That's censored now. If you try to, most of the algorithms are now doing that. Now, why would they want to censor 1984 or George Orwell? Your guess is good as mine. I think it's because it hit the nail on the head exactly. It was an exact prediction of what's going on now. Everything that we know to be true is being turned on its head, and we are given what's like a cartoon reality, because at the same time as there's the real threat of AI and robotics and all of this stuff. I had an article out where Google AI was telling people to drink pee. They're asking it for advice. It's telling them to drink light colored pee. So you can't take it serious what the AI is putting out, because you have to remember, and I harp on this, the AI still right now is in the parameters of the programmers that program it, the coders that coded it. And those people read all these same books that we did. They had the same visions of the future that we do. The, part that is boggling, I guess, is why did they choose to be on the side of the Ministry of Truth? Why did they decide to be on the censorship end of things? What is it that they know that we don't know? And do they think they're doing it for the greater good? Because it all boils down to incrementalism. They are doing this ahead of time for when you actually have legitimate complaints. And I'm not talking about any fabled wrongdoing that you might be mad about that people did hundreds of years ago, or perceptions of being unfairly treated based on different things. But the reality is every single individual on the planet is in danger of losing not just their privacy, but all of their other human rights to live on this planet, including, but not limited to, eating, drinking, and breathing. And if they don't get this system to where they can completely censor and control the masses, then of course they have a big, problem when it comes to disseminating their truth or their version of reality. And we've already seen the first go around in the last couple of years. I mean, if anybody is still on the side of trusting the science on a multitude of different topics, then they are completely lost, because science, admittedly by itself, a couple of weeks ago, they had an article out that I think it was up to 40% of scientific papers had to be retracted. I actually think it was more than that, but I'm going to go ahead and say 40. But if it was anywhere from 10 to 20%, you would already be concerned. So if you're past 20% of supposed trusting the science people giving you peer-reviewed articles that turn out to be bogus, bunk, untrue, and just silly, not to mention the fact that some of the people that are coming up with the ideas are regurgitating ideas back through the algorithm and having the algorithm filter it and rewrite it for them. So you're getting a watered down version of censorship of any idea. And I think that's really bizarre, because at the same time our civilization just got interested or reinterested in ancient people and what they were doing, it seems to be about the time they're going to pull the plug on it. And I really don't think that they destroyed information in these past resets. That would be silly to think that they actually would do that. Instead, they hoarded it. You imagine what's in the Vatican? After the Library of Alexandria burned, do you think they really burned all the good books? Because from what I can research, most of what was burned was like titles to properties or laws that about disputes and things like that, things chronicling everyday living situations. They weren't the esoteric knowledge or the secrets that might have been passed down in the secret schools. No, those things were hoarded. Those things were taken back to the Vatican. And we know we have several places like that. And it seems like the internet was just a technological new version of that. But this time they built the library, and now they're burning it down. Now that they've acquired all of the knowledge that might be out there, they didn't know was out there. I mean, think about that. If you have copies of things that have been banned or destroyed or memory hold, and then you pop them back up on the internet, well, they know where you're at and they know who you are, and they know there's still copies of those things out there. And that's exactly what happened to the internet between 1990 and 2015. They mass gathered data. That includes all the data was out there. They know exactly who the people are that put out that stuff. And now that they're destroying that evidence or getting rid of the trails that lead people back to certain thought processes, what do you think they're going to do with the people that are holding on to the past, to the old history, or to the old knowledge? Well, they're going to have to eradicate them as well. That's not a problem for the masses, though. I mean, if you watch any kind of social media that puts out the way things are day-to-day street life in cities across the U.S., you'll see that culture is gone, civilization is collapsing, and we are in the idiocracy. I would put Mike Judge right up there with Orson Welles in predicting what it would be like in just a few short years later. I mean, really, we are there as far as the idiocracy point of view of it, from the politicians that they represented on the movie to the average Joe's intelligence and how they live their life. That is bizarre. And then that poem that you read, you described it exactly. I think the part that they left out was the end of that. Is to get rid of all of those people that are linked to their devices and stuff, because they've now created an entirely sedentary, lethargic populace that not only is not in shape, but they're deficient in nutrients, and they're either underfed or overfed, but neither groups are usually healthy as far as exercise, nutrients, vitamins, and things like that. And in the past week, I've seen at least 10 articles saying that if you go outside and you enjoy the sun, you're going to have a heart attack. That the odds of you having a heart attack greatly reduced from sunbathing or hanging outside. I don't know about that. Every time I go outside for long periods of sun, work or leisure in the sun, yes, I feel a little tired at the end of it, but afterwards you feel refreshed, healthy, energized. So I don't know what they're talking about. So everything's on its head. They're telling you things like good food is bad for you, but bad food is good for you. Sunlight is bad for you, but staying inside glued to a blue light source is good for you. And then you'll have conflicting articles, of course. So they have it so construed and convoluted, the information available out there. There's no telling what actually is a conspiracy theory and what's not when you compare reality to predictions. And I would say that our predictions over the last couple of years were right on the money, and we're right there, short of nuclear bombs popping off. And God forbid that happens. But if it does, I'm convinced that that's not even a big deal as far as the Earth goes. I'm really convinced of this now, the more I look at it. 2,000 plus nuclear warheads. Another thing that we've mentioned over and over again, they've already exploded these in the upper atmosphere, in the ocean, on the ground, in the ground. And guess what? We're still here. So that tells me they could take out 100 to 1,000 cities across the globe, completely get everybody locked down in paranoia, fear, and that would be whenever they would pull out their big card that probably no one's expecting, or maybe some people are expecting, is the admission that extraterrestrial life is out there, and it's possible that either we need to go out there and find out about it, or it's coming here. And even the religions are swinging that way, and it tells me that it's all fiction. They want to pull the plug on it, and there will be an indoctrination afterwards. And if you're not part of the indoctrination, you're going to be a target. And I think the message that they're going to be sending people is that you must be connected at all times. You must be connected to them for safety, for direction, for truth, for any information or knowledge that you have. And those other people that are saying things and doing things, demonstrating know-how, they are the reason that the last world got, blowed up or destroyed. And think about that. With all of the other things that they blame on the average citizen, don't you think that if they had a massive nuclear war that they would propagandize that to somehow blame the average Joe for the reason that happened because we're so greedy and we're destroying the earth? I think that's where it's going. I don't know how much more you can predict. We're either going to go in a good positive direction, which I think there's a slim chance of that, or a very negative one. And that negative one for the short term, I predict that we are going to have a South China Sea incident, which is going to stop shipping and increase the food prices for the United States, with some additional incidents in the Middle East, which will hike gas prices to unreasonable stuff. And right now in Mexico, speaking of Mexico, they're all worried about having their hottest year ever. Their gas prices are soaring in Mexico right now, and they're a good indication of what will happen here shortly.
Well, happy Thursday to you too. Oh, insanity rules the day. What can we say? I think it would only take 5 to 7 cities, Ransom. Sacrificed with low tonnage on that, low megatonnage equivalent. The spook factor would be enough. 5 cities, the one, okay, people are like, hey, you're so angry. And then all of a sudden, if it, like, there was one and then 2 countries launched 2 at each other, that'd be 5. And then if another 3 came over, okay, we got to stop. That would terrify the world, would it not? Just see, it wouldn't even need to be 10 cities of major Paris, New York, London, etc. I bet nothing in the Middle East will get hit, though, because that's where the new finance center and all the new debt is going to be restructured from. So when you look at expendable areas on the planet, it's not everywhere. Please understand that. It is definitely not everywhere. What would you need to destroy the old debt system? Well, you would need to destroy, like the Hall of Records, like you said, where the financial centers around the planet. If you're telling me that everything in the Twin Towers was wiped out from, I forget which bank it was, there was an enormous amount of insider trading that went on before that happened. And then those very computers of the server database that was able to trace who made those trades back during that time was destroyed when the towers came down. So that entire system of data, or that entire stock market running operation, was in that building that came down, so there was no record of it. So think about Library of Alexandria, the same thing. You would bring down the Hall of Records, would you not? Now, Hall of Records today is data centers, bank mainframe databases. What cities would they go after? Do you think to reset the financial system because you need to destroy all of the previous records, or many of them? And if you don't have it on paper, like if you don't have that, any of you that trade stocks out there, if you don't have the actual stock certificate issued in front of you and in your hand, you don't own it. Your brokerage is acting as an intermediary for that. Now you're giving them the right to hold it in lieu of you. You can hold on to something long term and say, hey, I want my Coca-Cola shares. Now I'll scroll them off and send them to me, and then you're the physical owner of them. But nobody does that. There's fees and everything with it. So what would really be out there to be reconstructed? Your precious metals, okay, any stock certificates you had, the deeds to your homes, etc. If you had that. And heaven forbid you could produce a mortgage, you'd have to continue paying on that, of course, at the new interest rate with the new bank, with the new money and the new currency that was issued after the destruction. It's all a big loop. So when you're looking out, resistance is fertile. You're going to have to grow your own food. But what's that intermediate step between erasing the banking system and erasing the Hall of Records in our modern world and leaving it just a complete destroyed wreck of itself? Because I like to travel, and I've been to a lot of places around the world. I'm a history buff and fan. When you go into these older places, I'm talking like Roman era, Greek era, etc. It's just piles of rubble and stone. Very, when they reconstruct it, then it looks cool. But if you go to a real site where they haven't really done much reconstruction, a little bit of excavation, and there's some, foundations around and columns, and you could actually see where the cities might be, or part of it had been. It's just literally piles of rubble. And that's what our cities would turn into. It's just literally piles of rubble. I mean, there was something there. Yeah, you could reconstruct it maybe. Well, why'd you go to just explain the story and here's the foundations from it. Some of these places like Petra, when I went in there in Jordan, come up and I didn't realize that it was such a vast, vast city under there. When I say under there, I'm talking about in the wadis and down in those canyons. Like, it's not an above ground city. And when the Hittites controlled that place, is across, border, or not across border, but an intermediary place for trade to go in any direction, like a hub, a spoke in the wheel, right at everything was shooting out from there. They controlled vast swaths of wealth and invisible from the surface. I mean, you'd look across there and you couldn't see a single thing, nothing, no buildings, nothing, but it was all down in the canals and wadis that were sculpted from water. Massive floods had rolled through that place many thousands of years ago that had sculpted such wide canyons and deep, a couple 100 feet deep canyons of this crazy sandstone in there. It was very striated, different colored sandstones. And one thing I liked is because with boots, man, you're like Spider-Man, and anywhere you go climbing, you could just grab onto your boots, would just grab everything on the sandstone. That was the coolest climbing. You could do tons of bouldering and get into places and get out without having to worry about slip, or there was no rain. It was great for, that kind of outdoor thing. But it was square miles and square miles of buildings. You go back and there's a huge old Roman amphitheater way back, down one of those causeways. I mean, there was buildings everywhere. They looked like they had been melted to me. Looked like an entire city had been melted off the sides into the cliffs. But you get lost forever. They don't exactly tell you where everything is, because if you went to explore, you're really talking, 10 square miles of buildings and foundations and plus. It's outrageous how much habitation there was just in Petra. And what we hear today is, you got the treasuries there, and you got, like I say, the little Colosseum at the end, and that's kind of it. It was just a square mile of stuff at the apex of the civilization. You're like, square mile? That's not nothing, man. Like downtown Manhattan's how big, But I am telling you, Petra was at least as big as all of Manhattan, if not bigger, and all in these canyons, all carved out of stones, rolling over some small little, hills between where the canyons were, kind of at a pass between the canyons, and it just spread everywhere. So you're telling me that there's that much history in one little tiny place, and then what's the rest of history telling us? That's the whole thing. Because you mentioned, you tripped me onto something, because I was watching this interesting video about insane asylums and mansions. So during the past reset, or at the time of the last reset, I encourage everybody to look into insane asylums or asylums in the late 1800s. Now you can hear the rain pounding on the roof again, another shower coming through. These showers are not light showers. Usually you get some rain. These are just like dumps of river from the sky just for 10 minutes. I mean, like a hose on top of the roof, and then it stops. So you can hear it getting louder now. It's not like that. Usually it's very light and gentle rain, or you'll hear it, but this is kind of loud on a metal roof above with an insulated ceiling up another whole floor. That's from the roof sound, down 2 floors. That's crazy. And you can hear the wind pounding on it too. And I'm telling you one thing, the rainstorms and the intensity of the storms is definitely way upticked this year. Like every time it rains, it just rips from the sky. Like you can hear it again, another pulse. It's coming in these pulses. But back to the insane asylums. The thing was, so many people were put in there. And why were they put in there? Because it was people who disagreed with the rewritten history, or the history that was being written. Just like you described, Ransom, the people who had the knowledge, their websites are gone, but the physical mind's there. They probably got all hard copies of everything. They printed everything. A lot of them are publishers. They got hard copies to prove that this, and they could redistribute it if they want to. And this was the whole thing about the insane asylums and the orphan trains and all these other things going on at the same time. There was a reset, and there were people left. People knew the old world, and they knew it was complete BS what they were trying to tell as the story in the new world. And then these people were disappeared into these insane asylums. I'm telling you, there's something here that about these resets when they come. The people who have the knowledge of the old world must be removed, because everything of that world's destroyed. But there's still those that could tell the story that are old enough, that lived in the world. An 80-year-old person, a 60-year-old person, a 50-year-old person, when they see the world reset, would easily be able to tell you how it was before. And that's wrong, what they're writing there. That's incorrect. And that's the world we sit in. So anyway, I do agree with you, Ransom. There's a lot of stuff in that reset package that's coming forth toward us.
Actually, I think you figured out the main backbone of the greatest transformation of wealth ever. If you think about what we were just talking about, missing files, missing information on 9/11, you think about that now more in terms of the internet disappearing, right? And if they could convince the majority of people that have assets, wealth, to buy into digital currencies, and then the entire system gets wiped out. At the end of that, papers, like say the whole grid went down, and maybe it didn't really go down, but they're saying it's in effect null and void. It doesn't work. We can't trust anything. And then you're going to have people, like you said, with those actual copies of stocks, bonds, deeds. And guess what's going to happen? They're not going to accept them because they can't verify whether or not they're legit, because none of the services that scan them for being fakes are available anymore. So that would boil down to who has actual precious metals and gold to trade or items. So on the low level, we're talking down here, we're trading food and tools. But on the big level of ownership of all things, only certain groups are going to be able to participate. Those groups that have the majority of those stockpiles of gold, silver, iron, nickel, platinum, etc. They are going to be the number one source of money, and those are the same people that own it now. So after the everything goes down, so to speak, digitally, how could anyone even prove they had any money? Well, you know what? They'll be there to save the day by giving people rations so that they could go on. But the bulk of the wealth disappears. It just disappears. How can you even prove that you had money in a digital system if that digital system is no longer active or functioning, or has allegedly been destroyed by the sun or by hackers or by a rogue nation? You could take your pick of boogeymen on why it would happen, but if it did happen, it would boil down to people that had precious metals and property to protect as the only source of wealth, right? Everybody else would just be lost out there, and they'd have to figure out barter or depend on some kind of entity, a government entity or a charity entity to just eat. Because most people do not own land, and most people do not know how to grow food, and most people actually do not know how to hunt or clean or cut the meat without getting sick. They don't know what to eat that's wild. I mean, all of these things are going to be basically lost. The good thing is there are millions and millions and millions and millions, probably billions of hard copy books still in circulation. So unless there's a major book burning or some kind of move to illegally, and I can see tricks come about. So they have the right-leaning people wanting to ban certain books, rightly so, for what their contents are, at least in the elementary schools. But I could see that being spread out later to include any other books that they wanted to get rid of. Maybe home gardening, maybe an electrical book to teach you how to do your own electricity, because you can't do that without a professional or the government's permission, or at least you shouldn't get caught doing it, or you'll get in trouble, because that's happened to me before. I've done all kinds of electrical work and no one ever knows. But if they so happen to catch you doing it, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have to pay fines. You don't have a license. You didn't go to school to learn that. And then, think about that. People's degrees and them, things like that will be worthless without a place to actually confirm that is legit. And think about all the background checks, all the murders being solved. It really is a nightmare if the new digital Library of Alexandria gets destroyed in some way. And one of those ways is the purposeful destruction and takeover by super entities that have AI and algorithms that can censor in real time. And now we're at the point with deep fakes of not only audio but imagery. Literally, you can't believe what you watch on TV. You could see something happen on TV that looks completely legit, that was completely AI created. Now, when you let AI create it itself, there's problems. It doesn't exactly see the world like we do. However, with a little bit of cleanup and some more instructions, it can get some perfect imagery going on, and you cannot believe what you see. So let's rewind to whenever the Japanese prime minister got shot. How do you know that actually happened, other than the news agencies told you it happened, and that went around? For all I know, that guy is alive, because really, I watched the video and I heard two loud booms and a little smoke and a lot of people, shuffling around to jump on the guy, and then they told us he was dead. Now, I believe that really happened. However, my point being that I know that people can create that. That means they can create any kind of event that they want to happen, and the majority of the masses will believe it. Now, thank God right now that we have stuff like Twitter and the instantaneous transfer of knowledge right now, where there's loopholes out there. There's ways to get information across, and that has been the balance to the disinformation. But when you're getting into a point where now the providers of internet have algorithms that can take down content before it's even uploaded, because it knows what it is. It basically can scan what the content is before it even gets uploaded. And then you have real-time editing, which we've seen at the Super Bowl and other places where they fixed people's singing voices, or they altered out something that was there. And now people are even wondering if, when they're watching these sporting events, are they even actually watching something that's happening, because there's a lot of digital artifacts and other things like that that are making people question, and for a good reason, because the technology exists to change what you see right when you're seeing it. The scary part is I've been expanding this thought out, and I know this really doesn't have nothing to do with nothing, but it's a little woo-woo. If we have the technology right now to peer into one's mind and see what's in there, and we have the technology to manipulate their feelings, emotions, and things based on information that we show them, then imagine it, you fast forward that, upgraded, into the future a little bit, and it's easy to see that humans could do it. But what about extraterrestrials or artificial intelligence that are using that? The idea that if you look into it, the way the human mind works is, when you look at things, you're not actually seeing 100% of what you're seeing. You're seeing a small percent of that, and your mind fills in what should be there, or what's usually there, what it expects to be there. And if you know that, then you realize that technologies can literally change what you see live. And that's the scary part. And that would be only a decade away. But imagine some kind of group, extraterrestrial, human, artificial intelligence, that hasn't actually been using it yet, that's more advanced than what we're seeing 50 years, 100 years. Then you can see that you can't even believe what you see and hear while you're in real life at some point, much less over the interwebs or over the television or through your phone. So if you can't trust it now, how are we going to be able to trust it in the future, especially when they're deleting references, they're deleting the proof that things happened, or the track record, or the history, or the metadata that says something happened. All of that is manipulatable now. So we're in a world where you literally cannot believe what you see, hear, or read, and you have to depend on your own senses, and even they can be, manipulated. So I think that, we're at a weird spot. I feel like sometimes sitting in my own home that I should take everyone's device, unplug the Ethernet, turn off the power, and just start playing with soil and plants, and, take advantage of knowing your family and your animals, and looking at the sky and enjoying, the flowers. Like out in my yard right now, it's just covered in hollyhocks. It's beautiful. There's bees and birds and squirrels, and, everything's out there. It's just a beautiful thing to live out in the real world. And as you were saying from that Elliott stuff, that's all being replaced. Every sense that you can have, every sensory perception that you have, is being manipulated from all directions with multiple narratives, multiple propaganda angles. So, who do you trust for your information? Do you even trust yourself when you think you know something? Because I've been finding a lot now that some of the things I thought were the way they weren't actually that way. But then again, I question whether or not the information has been changed, because I have a dictionary here from the 20s, and the definitions are different than the Webster's Dictionary online. It's different from the other dictionaries online. And not only that, there's usually a little tab there that says, what was it like, what was the definition back then? And you click on that, and it still has the updated definition. It's complete propaganda. So if you're going to change the meaning of words, who won events in history, and we know that this is nothing new. You brought up the Hittites. There's famous not petroglyphs, hieroglyphs and engravings in Egypt, where they were telling the Egyptian people that they were winning the war against the Hittites, when they actually were losing land and losing massive amounts of troops. So, and then you fast forward today, you got the what was his name over there in Baghdad that was telling everybody that they were winning while America was pounding that shock and awe invasion. And then you go back to World War II, where they were telling the German people, don't worry about it. We're winning it. Don't worry about it. The same thing is very likely to happen in the near future. And you combine that with ideas like the Gulf of Tonkin and 9/11, and who knows how we're being manipulated. Like you were saying right now, there seems to be a plan in the background, even with the Chinese and the Russians, where they're showing one hand that they're doing this, but there's some kind of large strategic plan in the background. The question is has our side of this been sold out? Are we just playing the loser card that was given to us so we could play out our role in the formation of this new world government?
Play out your role as a debt slave and a serf, nothing more than a cog in the machine. Remember how you said you might not be seeing the full reality. Dionysian glass, or Dicinian glass, is that how you say that? Dicinian glass. Because I do remember Kilmer screens in the movie They Live. So I'm wondering, Ransom, have you been able to find any of these Dicinian glass sunglasses anywhere? Or do you know where to find any of this glass? Because I would be interested in peering into the other dimension that this opens up.
No, I don't know, but when you eat enough mushrooms, things look a little different. So I don't know if that counts, but they definitely tweak the world around you, and you can see the universe breathing, or at least allegedly. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Just like a compound, the sources of authoritative information, which is a new term from just the last couple of years. There's no telling what they're telling you, and everything they tell you so far turns out to be wrong just a few short years later. I would suggest that people go back like to 2000 and then read what the conspiracy theorists were writing and saying, read what the mainstream news was saying, and see who's right if you fast forward to today. And I would think the conspiracy theories are batting 100 right now.
Oh, yeah, at least, right? Everything that our entire reality is built on is the construct of what were those glimpses of the future of shadowy bodies coming together to try to control the human domain and humanity itself. There's only so many chess moves that can be accomplished before you come back to zero again, and we've run the cycle. I'm totally in agreement with you. There's only two things that can be left: alien invasion and nuclear war. I think the nuclear war would come first. And secondly, the aliens would come down and say, humans, stop the nuclear war. We're here. We've always been here. You've just gone too far this time. We're here to save you. I can absolutely see that. And that would be but all these smaller steps in between that are the underlying currents of that. Because if you look at a stream or a river, you have that surface current, which you can see with your eyes. And then even going 6 inches down under the river next to the banks, there's a different current. And heaven forbid you go 10 feet under, there's a different current there as well. So how many underlying currents are moving along with the main narrative floating down the river? Think about the Mississippi River and the paddle boats back in the 1800s. Very dangerous to go up the rivers at that point. So many different dangers that were lurking, but it all looked smooth on the surface. You can take these different points and connect them that is how the control and the milking of wealth, or the extraction of wealth, is going to occur. Just think about America, or any country really, as a farm, as a different farming technique for different nations. And the productivity of different nations is determined by the farming technique, whether it's communism or whether it's socialism, some sort of blend in between. Is it pure capitalism? Is it a tourist nation? Whatever. Is it a manufacturing nation? Doesn't matter. The different farming techniques with different needed services for global elite or to build out the world to where it needs to be for the next maneuver to happen. But each of these systems is allowed to work independently on its own for the greater, I guess, meshing of the whole. Can't have too many people too free. And that's the whole thing, is with the amount of nations, if you go around the world and you look to see the control mechanisms and governance structures of individual farms called countries, I don't really ever think there's been on this planet where every person was completely free to use their mind. Because if you're in a communist state, think about North Korea. Are they free to use their minds as much as we are, or some others? The creatability, they don't even know there's much outside the country itself. So for them to come in with different manifestation capabilities, it'll be there, but it'll be a limited, narrow range compared to 100% possibility. And how many of these other countries are borderline that? So how many, through the historical record, how many times has this planet been completely free for humanity to manifest? And that would include kicking the leaders off if they become too dark. So think about the system being designed from the ground up. You know that humanity, even if they're not united, their minds can still manifest. So you put different, like I say, thumb screws on 20% of the population. You hobble the other 20% of the population. Like 100% of humanity is never allowed to think freely. Farming techniques are such. America is going to turn into something else. This farm is being transitioned right now. It's being tilled under, for a better term, if you're going to talk in agricultural terms here. It's going to be replanted with a new crop. Now, what that is, it's going to be a different farming technique for those who reside here. And just the same, there's more fertilizer, there's more impetus, there's more debt, there's more money going into other places that will spur it and create a new system over there. And obviously it will have to be much more free. There'll have to be the rule of law. People will have to know there's a future to work toward, and those areas will then prosper, like taking care and putting compost on your flower bed. The world has always been under control, and I just wonder, how long this has been. People can say 6,000 years, the Sumerians, the legends, etc. But you go back 400,000 years, and yeah, okay, that's down. What, Credo Mutwa and those we're talking about in Southern Africa, about the gold mining from the Anunnaki, that's only 400,000 years. Even at that time, do you think people were free to manifest around the world? You're under Anunnaki control. Do you think at that point, 400,000 years ago, people would be able to just do what they want? Of course not. Those things apparently were brutal. Like Roman legionnaires back in the day when they just went in or the Genghis Khan armies and just wiped everything clean. So you'd have to go prior 400,000 years. And then who knows where that takes us back in time. Or control or technology would be the best things. I talked about it before. I really believe in, going back into, if you just study Indian texts, 23 million years old is approximately the date that they put humanity as we know humanity now here. So how much of that time has been under control? That's why I say you only get these glimpses and snippets of freedom across the human domain on 40% of the planet, probably 60% at best at any one time, because it all has to be under control. With that many humans everywhere manifesting and coming together intuitively, you would have to dumb them down with the food sources, the education system, the toxins in the environment, all the way down to the LED lights where it's blinking and interfering with your senses. And that's in the free countries. We're at this juncture right here where light and dark are, again, at this cusp. Can darkness swing? Can the light swing? We always come up to this point. We always have, always will. We're at this point right now where we're in the resetting phase, and the duality of what was, what is, and what could be, to quote Camel Toe. What will the outcome be this time? Or does it always revert back again? I'll say one thing. I saw this Black Mirrors episode, and it was about the society was set up where people would meet and they'd have a time clock, and they would, as soon as the time was up, they'd have to separate, whether it was 1 minute or 1 year or whatever. They were stuck together for that period of time, and everybody obeyed the clock. But once it rolled through and they're like, I just don't feel like I want to obey the clock. And once it came all the way to that point where they go, no, we're no longer going to obey the clock, the system completely reset, and it said it took like 1,122 tries for it to work this time, and then it reset back to zero again, like boosh, right back to everybody day one again. And how many simulations had to be run until that one pair or one person or whatever bucks the system and says no more, and then it resets. I think we're in this looping dynamic field of some sort of like technological consciousness, not infinite consciousness. Again, it's a false reality of what is. It's technological consciousness. Infinite consciousness comes from the creator. It's overlaying, interweaving with the system here. It's in front. I don't know, I was trying to go somewhere, but I really believe that this freedom of humanity, again, is being reset because the humans around the world are becoming too powerful with their minds again. So I think that might be the key of it also. It's not just the debt system ran it to its end. Humanity has become powerful enough in the mind and uniting enough in the mind to now become such a threat that they need to be scattered to the winds again. So these powers can take control of the dimensionality here, this third dimension. Once again, they're about to lose it. So humanity needs to be reset so they can regain it. I don't know, is that too far-fetched?
Not at all. And, I wanted to get your opinions on this article because this kind of fits into what you're saying here. We've all heard the Out of Africa story that basically says that modern humans came out of Africa around 70 to 100,000 years ago. The problem with that is that if you've been following finds of hominid species, you know that they go back a lot further than that. And with new genetic studies, we know that the story is completely backwards, or at least missing a lot of information. So according to genetics, sub-Saharan Africans came about 56,000 years ago, somewhere between 50 and 56,000 years ago, where Cro-Magnon that already existed mated with an archaic species. And we know that that same thing was happening in Europe and in Asia. The problem with that is that this throws the skew of when humans were around by a long way. So here's an article from the Daily Mail. 1 million year old skull found in China may be the Dragon Man. So they go down here, and if you don't know what the Dragon Man is, it's Homo longi, or also known as what do you call them? Denisovan. They're pretty much agreed that this is the same hominid. And this is the problem with the human species and the history of the human species. This mysterious ancient human-like skull, see, they say human-like right here, was found in China, may have been the love child of two different species. According to researchers, they believe that 900,000-year-old individual was a hybrid, part us and part Homo sapien, part Homo longi, a long-lost species known as the Dragon Man. Now, I'm sure that your ears and raised up just a little bit at the date of 900,000 years. Not that big a deal. What's a big deal is that humans are not supposed to be existing as far as modern humans, but they're clearly saying that modern humans mixed with this Homo longi 900,000 years ago. That's approximately 1 million years ago. I mean, give or take 100,000 years, right? So 900,000 years ago, humans were mating with Denisovan. And we know the same is true for Cro-Magnon, because now we have new genetic information that says that we didn't just mix with them once or twice or three times, but along 700,000 years at least, multiple exchanges in DNA. The problem with that is that Cro-Magnon man, when tested, and most of those bodies are found between 40 and 30,000 years, the archaic DNA in Cro-Magnon was static for 50,000 years, meaning it stayed the same. It means he was fully functional for almost 100,000 years, or fully functional. I don't mean that. I mean, he was a fully developed human. And that goes back at least 70,000 years ago. They were saying they tried to keep you in that range. But this article right here is talking about exactly that. That would be Cro-Magnon and Denisovan mixing 1,000,000 years ago. So they have no idea what the human story is. And you got to remember that these other species, although different species, were other humans. And not only that, all three groups from Asia to Europe, and I'm only going to include Cro-Magnon, Denisovan, and Neanderthal, because we have the most genetic evidence, the most artifacts, the most bones. And we know that these three branches of humanity have existed for at least 1,000,000 years, and that would insinuate that if Cro-Magnon man had a fully developed chin, that he was eating grain for hundreds of thousands of years for the morphology to change that way, which insinuates that farming is millions of years old, not 30,000, not 20,000, not 10,000, not 8,000, but more like at least 1,000,000 years. And it might have been different. It might not have been large scale farming, but small farming, because they were definitely eating things that changed the morphology of the way that their skulls. But keep in mind that all three of these species had a bigger cranial capacity than we do today. All three of them had bigger brains than modern humans. Now, some people say that's due to massive mixing between all of the hominid species, that we have a balance of skull size, but it almost goes into what we're talking about a reset. It seems like there were at least 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 different large cranial capacity species that existed on the Earth before the end of the Hunger Dryas. And this is probably when we get all these megalithic structures, Neolithic structures, and things like that with no writing, which kind of insinuates that these big-brained humans, all three of at least those main ones that we know a lot about, had some form of communication other than speaking or writing. So that kind of fits into telepathy and different things like that. I don't know what you think about that, but it is strange that they're just now, right when all the information's going to be, put down the memory hole, they're insinuating that, well, we were kind of wrong about how long humans were here, and there might have been, several different versions of humans, and several of them mixed together, and here we are today, and we don't know nothing about a whole 1,000,000 years worth of history right there, because this is directly saying that a human being, a modern human, and a Homo longi mated 900,000 years ago. And that means that there probably wasn't government around telling them what they could or couldn't do, at least in that area. I don't know. What do you think about that? Because this is one of many indications, along with genetics, that tells us that modern man has been around for like 1,000,000 years, if not 70, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. We don't even know, because we only have the evidence of the last 100,000 years to really look at. But the more and more of these fossils we find, and then we get the DNA out of them, we find out that, hey, we've been around here for a long time. Different versions of us have come and gone extinct, had their own cataclysms, their catastrophes, and yet at the end, here we still are.
In between here and there has to be the robot dog with a flamethrower on it somewhere. Don't know how that tech got all mixed up. I think that would have been at least 9 interglacials between then and now. So an interglacial, for anybody out there, is 10,000 years of warmth between ice ages on average. Look what we've accomplished in 10,000 years. We've built rockets, supposedly have satellites, headed off to Mars, and a bevy of other things. We've reached the ocean bottom. We've all done that during this interglacial. So if we're able to do it, then what did they do during the last 9 other interglacials? And what kind of technology exists from that? I firmly believe Antarctica is or was the giant continent with most of the civilization. And if we're finding all these ruins and megaliths all around the world, those have been the satellite colonies themselves. So the main hub, for a better term, would have been on the continent of Antarctica. That's why nobody's allowed down there. Can you imagine the artifacts you'd be finding everywhere if that was the one area on the planet that was the main habitation zone for that previous civilization or the previous prior reset time? And everything we're finding from Egypt to anything in South America, Central America with the ruins, that's periphery colonies. Those are small second, third tier cities comparatively. Thanks for joining us tonight. Ransom Godwin, DuByne. See you next week. Resistance is fertile. Grow your own food.
Thank you for listening to Revolution